But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. Lysander Spooner. Alrighty. And with that, welcome back to another episode of the Full Metal Cast. Another episode where you will not be seeing part of my shining, and I promise you it is shining, face as I am sitting outside enjoying my coffee and a glass of water, fresh out of bed. This is my favorite way to start the morning, as God intended. I truly do believe outside, getting as much sun as possible. Really before doing anything and starting my day. And this is one way I enjoy life. And obviously I'm an enjoyer of warm weather. So whenever I can take advantage of some sunlight, I absolutely will. If you haven't listened to the last episode, the one where our CQB instructor and ex-Marine and so many other things in life, Dutch, joins me and the fellas in a 3.5 hour long episode. We cover everything. It's a very interesting gentleman doing some really incredible things in the training space and offering classes and experiences to civilians at CQT, Close Quarters Tactical in Shelby Township, Michigan, that are really hard to find. And so I guess I'll shout out CQT a little bit here. And full disclosure, they have given me nothing. I owe them nothing, not related to them in any way. And there's a car coming by here, so I may pause to see if they're going to park or turn around. Yes, so CQT, very interesting indoor shooting facility here in the state of Michigan. One of its kind, as far as I can tell, in the state, or at least in the southeast part of the state, that not only manufactures their own firearms, has Cerakoting they offer, and a pretty impressive wall of tools that you can peruse and purchase there. I believe the last time I was there with a couple of my boys, which was like a week or two ago, they had an M16 with an underbarrel on it, so that was pretty sweet, and it wasn't that much, honestly, shockingly enough. As far as their pricing goes and other firearms, I can't really say I've taken that close of a look, as I am pretty much topped off here and I need to be a little responsible with my money as I look to move into a house. But yes, no, manufacture their own firearms, Cerakoting, impressive wall of guns to try out and purchase. They also have a 2-story indoor shoot house that you could do live fire CQB training in. They also do simunition, force-on-force CQB training and other things for other leagues within that house. They also have a class or a course. I'll have to get some clarification from Dutch or have him on the show to talk about it, where you go into the shoot house, there is simunition, and it is somewhat of like a full contact, no stop, no holes barred like experience where, I think it's called Dominate the Fight, where you are in very stressful situations in very tight quarters with other people, and these are guys trained in jiu-jitsu. These are guys, maybe you brought there that don't really know how to fight, but they're getting hands-on with you. You're fully padded, full protective gear from head to toe, but it's really sort of to simulate that stress and that violence of being in a real, experiencing a real threat in a real scenario where you are going to have to use force, whether that be deadly force via a firearm or, using your hands or your body to protect yourself. So doing some really, really cool things. The other self-defense classes, classes for women. They do different combat sports training as well there, as they have a gym there too. It's a really, really cool place, and the word about them doesn't really get out enough. So as I mentioned when I started this thing off, this is really to be a positive voice in the sort of firearm space and community, and that's what makes me happy. That's what brings me joy. So I'd like to see more people getting in there and training. The classes are pretty affordable too. That CQB league that me and the boys took, it was 4 weeks, I believe. 4 or 5 weeks. Once it was every Friday for 2 to 3 hours, and honestly, it's only on the calendar for 2 hours, but if you got a larger class, Dutch has gone a little over an extra hour over to make sure everyone gets their time, that runs in, can ask questions, and can be really comfortable in what we were going over for the day. So it's a very, very cool community and very, very cool thing they have built over there. So check them out. And again, they don't pay me. I've only paid them to take classes. Maybe one day I'll be sponsored by CQT, but until then I will be spreading the good news. Anyways, quote for the episode, for those who are sharp observers, will note that that was not necessarily a quote from a known Stoic, nor a quote about living in the moment or being mindful of your mortality. Instead, it was a quote from the epilogue of the ending sort of note in Lysander Spooner's work, No Treason, The Constitution of No Authority. And I do believe I brought it up before, but it is one of my favorite works ever to read. Not just an anarchist work, not just, work about freedom or any sort of philosophy, but it exists in, the top 5 reads for me. And the best part is it's free. It's a PDF and it's online. Just look it up, Lysander Spooner, No Treason, and give it a read. And the reason why I am revisiting this, and I've cracked it open again, and I'm reading it from cover to cover, is because of what's going on the college campuses, and especially after the anti-Semitism bill finally was conceived, I guess, we'll say. More so specifically, the anti-Semitism bill, I guess I'll get into first as it relates to that work by Mr. Spooner here. So Mr. Spooner was an attorney around the time of the Civil War, or post-Civil War, I believe, and he was an anarchist. He truly did believe in natural rights, and you as a human are completely entitled to these rights, and no man, group of men, or document, as you can probably guess by the title of the work, can ever alter or interfere with your rights. Funny enough, he became a lawyer somehow by means that was pretty backdoor in whatever state he was living in. I don't think his credentials as a lawyer were up to, the paperwork probably didn't line up with his counterparts in other states by the sound of it. I'll have to do some more digging, but I believe I remember reading that he found some loophole and fully exploited that, or just straight up declared himself a lawyer, and that was that. But either way, the pamphlet, the work, the document, No Treason, holds up extremely well today, given its age and given the background and the somewhat crazy character who wrote it. It is, and outside of this work, I don't know much about Lysander Spooner or his credibility. However, the work holds up extremely well and it reads very well, especially in the context of the craziness of today. However, his entire theory or hypothesis, I already went over that in this document, is that the Constitution it's a sham, in the aspect that it is not some contract that we have all signed into as civilians. We are not held to anything on it. We have never signed anything on it. In fact, compared to an average bill of sale or an agreement between friends who one party lent another $5 and one party promises to pay that other party back $5, that agreement has more of a binding nature than the actual Constitution. And then obviously the note from the epilogue that was a quote for this episode sort of brings that all together in his view of that. And he goes in about taxes and voting, and it's a very, very good document. But all that to say, the anti-Semitism bill, very clearly to anyone with half a brain cell, an infringement on the First Amendment. And yes, someone might say, well, the First Amendment doesn't protect hate speech. And you're right, the modern interpretation does not allow for, hate speech to be protected. However, the Second Amendment as it is written, and as it truly should be acknowledged, not even in the context of the Constitution, but just in natural rights, the words that leave your mouth are the words that leave your mouth, and no one should be able to muzzle you or threaten you with violence or any sort of repercussion for for saying anything, really. And we go back to the age-old expression, sticks and stones, right? Like, yeah, they can be mean, they can be untrue, they could be, emotionally hurtful, I guess. That might be a stretch even. But they don't physically hurt you unless you allow them to, or you act on them, and that's pretty childish to be putting that out into the airways. But here we are after the Antisemitism bill passed, and you can very, very clearly be punished for saying some... it's not even mean things, it's just things that the certain demographic deem to be inappropriate, and they get to sort of set those guidelines and what constitutes as quote-unquote hate speech now and what doesn't. And that should always be alarming. That's no different. That's just censorship. My stance on censorship has been covered greatly, mostly in the online context, but it obviously applies here as well. Hopefully that bird song comes through on the mic. It's pretty cool. I like it out here. I remember reading a breakdown of the bill, and that there's some association of whatever that gets to sort of determine which phrases, which words, which sentiments or ideas for that matter really constitute as anti-Semitism or hate speech for that matter. I'll have to go back and clarify to see if they were actually examples of expressions in the bill, or if these were examples provided by quote or just by idea. But saying things like the Jews killed Jesus, and regardless of your religion, if you're reading a religious text, if you worship, a certain religion, as your fucking freedom to do so, they can basically declare that hate speech. And I'll have to make sure and have to verify if that was actually an example in the bill, or if that was just a breakdown of the bill and an example of what could be labeled hate speech. But either way, giving the power to one group to arbitrarily set and declare what words or string of words constitute hate speech or aggression against them is a very dangerous thing. And of course, it'd be silly to be talking about this bill without the context that we are the greatest ally in, Israel's fight in the Middle East. And this bill passed as these protests and demonstrations are breaking out on college campuses, which I have a couple of things to say about that as well. And my hot take of the day is the protesters. If they are just demonstrating, if they are just in the quad, and they are not interfering with people on their way to or from class or to work, they're not assaulting people, if they're not destroying property, they've done nothing wrong. They've done nothing wrong. And listen, you can agree with their stance or not. It's beyond the point. It is their right. It's their natural right, their God-given right, as even protected by the Constitution, if we even want to just throw another layer of confirmation in there, to gather and demonstrate. I'm not here to debate whether I'll get into that, I guess. Some of the things that I've seen, said, and done are obviously not right, including the declaring that you are Hamas when you are some overweight, gender-neutral blob of flesh on a college campus. I can promise you they'd be giving you rooftop tours very quickly if you were to actually stand toe-to-toe with a Hamas soldier and let them know that you are with them. I guarantee, and especially if you're female too, you really have no idea what you're talking about, but that's beyond the point. They have the right to say those things. Again, so long as they are not infringing upon the rights of others. And I know it's going to sit, and that has sat rather uncomfortably with some people, especially at the family party I was at last night. They didn't really love that take, but it is my belief that they absolutely have the right. Whether they're right or wrong, you have to respect that right until they begin infringing upon your rights. Which leads us to the intervention of the state on these demonstrations. And listen, the reality of the matter is there's no college that's going to let this go on, so of course the cavalry is going to be brought in. How will the cavalry respond? And you know what? They didn't massacre college kids this time like they did in May 4th, however long ago it was. So kudos to the government, because that's seemingly what they do best whenever they call in their They're armed thugs. It's a flexing of monopoly on violence, and they love doing that. And I thought we got pretty close when we saw snipers on the rooftops of schools, and I think that says a lot about how they view certain people and certain threats, quote unquote, I guess we'll call them. The Uvalde, Texas example. I know this is just one example, but individual with a firearm is inside of the school actively, and we confirmed actively, taking the lives of innocent children. And what did the police do? They stood down, they sat by, they did nothing. Fast forward to these demonstrations where we have a very clearly unarmed group of out of shape and uneducated protesters gathering in tents on the quad. They're saying things, they're getting a little rowdy, but they're not taking lives, they're not assaulting people as far as I've seen. They were not armed again. But what did? We rolled up with full confidence, riot gear, rubber bullets, snipers on the rooftops. Snipers on the rooftops of these schools for what? And maybe there was information in, I don't know, however many schools. I know for sure one of the pictures, and it was in the intro of the last episode with Dutch, where it was very clearly Ohio State's campus where there was a rooftop sniper, but there's three others at least, three other pictures that were passed around the internet. I'm not sure if it was all from Ohio State or from different schools, but regardless, the fact that it was even there is quite the statement that we have, the state, not we, the state knows who's a threat and who's not. And you can use this information however you wish. I'm not going to, spell it out for you here. But it is much harder for them to stop anyone who's armed with a gun than it is for someone who's not. And that applies to all crime. Look at Chicago, for example. My favorite example of a failed city, Chicago. The laws are so strict. They're so strict there. Everything you see is illegal in the firearm space as relates to Chicago. If you just have any sort of doubt or question whether I can do X, assume that it's illegal in Chicago. And yet somehow it is like war zone out there every fucking day. Illegal automatic weapons, extended magazines, it does not matter. But what do they do about it? They do nothing, while instead targeting gun shops and slapping them with audits and going after the private citizens who are properly storing them at home, who actually bother to do the paperwork to legally acquire said firearms. As bills are passed, they will continually go after the legal firearm owners, because they know that once they go to knock on their doors, the threat of violence, the probability of being confronted with a violent individual is very low, because they have already complied up until this point, versus every other individual out on the street in Chicago, they will leave untouched. So, unfortunate for you if you are playing by the rules. And I hear a train coming by here, so I'm going to try to wrap up this thought quickly. But maybe keep that in mind as bills similar to the anti-Semitism bill are proposed and talked about and passed even. Maybe it is time to integrate some civil disobedience into your repertoire, your life, if you will. All right, train out of the way. I think that concludes that somewhat spicy thought. So we did protests, we did the anti-Semitism bill, some Spooner. Okay, the second Boeing whistleblower died. That's crazy, but it happens all the time, so I wouldn't look too much into that. Some things to consider as far as background in Boeing: they are indeed a very large part of the military-industrial complex, which is very much a part of the large global conflicts we are involved in, and who also has been bailed out by the government before previously. Again, do with that information what you will, but I don't really believe in coincidences when it comes to that sort of thing. It's just extremely odd, I guess, that it's happened not once but twice now. Yeah, still never gonna fly a Boeing though, me personally. Do what you will with your money and your travel preferences, though, I suppose. Let's see, I had some Uncle Ted notes here that were fairly interesting that I didn't get to get into in the last episode. So, oh yes, Apple readies in-box iPhone updates. So apparently, you never need to consent to an Apple iPhone update ever again. And I know this is simply referring to models that are on the iPhone floors or in boxes waiting to be sold, meaning that if you were to buy an iPhone, 15, maybe 6 months or a year after it came out, you won't have an update or updates 2 installed. It will already be updated with the latest firmware and fixes and patches and whatnot. However, that also implies that once you already have the phone, they can just do what they will to it without your consent. And I'm sure there's some laws and whatnot, surrounding that, but I don't think laws have ever, especially privacy laws and consent laws, have really mattered much to any of the big tech firms in general. So that's super cool. And then, all big tech firms get a bad rep. Obviously, if you are interested in your freedom and your privacy, you're going to hate big tech, but it's in your life, so you're dealing with it. Apple seems to be one of the better ones, maybe, I guess, if I think about it. And maybe I'm wrong, so correct me if I'm not, but they seem to be pretty standoffish whenever the government comes knocking on their door for information on iPhones used in crimes. And the prime example I'm thinking of was that, I think took place on the West Coast, where there was that workplace shooting. I think the one that was so famously classified as a workplace violence incident by Obama, where the iPhone was recovered, but they didn't have the password, and Apple would not cough it up. It went to court, and I still think they were not obligated to hand it over. So incredibly based, very cool. I do believe also their credit card, it may have changed, but after Chase and other big dicks swinging banks came out and said we're going to be tracking and helping the government track firearm and ammo purchases, I do believe Goldman Sachs, and this might have changed since, but at the time came out or maybe it was Apple, but bottom line is the Apple credit card, who was with Goldman Sachs, had essentially said we're not going to be doing any of that won't be shared. So whether that was Apple or Goldman, but I don't know, it had Apple's name on it. I don't even know if it's still a thing, but at least at the time they weren't on board with sending that information or categorizing or tracking that information. And maybe they were, they just didn't straight up say it, but either way, pretty neat. I am just under no disillusion, though, that any of my information is private if it is on any device anymore, though, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, look forward to your iPhone just doing more things without your consent, because it is known to do that. I know that's a big gripe among the Android community with the iPhone, in that Apple just knows best with you as it relates to UI and other phone and settings choices, and you really don't get control over your full phone as much as you do with an Android. So another thing to add to that mix of issues in your consideration between products. The next article I read, also we're still in Uncle Ted's Corner, by the way. Wearable AI ear computer coming. This popped up in LinkedIn news for me again. I exist in LinkedIn, unfortunately, and fortunately, for my job quite a bit. But it goes on to state the AI wearables market is getting a new entrant in the form of 2 large earbuds from Alphabet spin-off IO, or EO, it's IYO, called the EO1. The voice-controlled device will run on its own AI-powered operating system and won't need to be connected to a phone. IO is hoping developers will create apps for an assistant, email, search, and music. First-party apps will let users set timers, make calls, and more. The cellular-equipped version is expected to cost $699, and the Wi-Fi version will cost an estimated $599. EO hopes to start shipments by Christmas this year. Okay. Well, a couple things on this. I find the phone already fairly annoying after spending more than a couple hours on it a day. It hurts my head. I feel gross the more I'm on it. I don't think I want it in my ear, or ears for that matter, 24/7. Also, quick thought, we've all questioned or have been disturbed by the pervasiveness of cookies and your phone's ability to listen in on what you're talking to and then queue up extremely well-targeted ads in your email, your social media, your browser. If you thought that was bad or creepy or annoying, wait until that's in your ear 24/7. You might imagine asking your phone to set a timer and it says, yeah, right after this 30-second ad for fucking Bud Light or something. Yeah, no fucking thank you. It's an Alphabet spinoff. So if you know how YouTube works or any of that bullshit works, you know you're going to get fed ads 24/7. That's the entire business model. That's how they make their money. Also, any results on the search, they're going to be pumped directly into your ear, or any sort of media you're listening to that's getting pumped directly into your ear 24/7 is absolutely going to be catered and censored and paid to play for and by Google. So no fucking thank you. I won't have the AI in my ear telling me what to think and how to live my life 24/7. Oh, you're going somewhere you shouldn't be, imagine, I can tell by your surroundings you didn't take your pills for the day. You can't enter X grocery store or something, thinking back to a certain time of illness, let's just call it. So yeah, no thank you to the wearable AI that lives in your ear 24/7. And I think that might be it for Uncle Ted's Quarter today. Yes, it is. And I know I mentioned Chicago earlier, but between the time I saw the video and now, we had the episode with Dutch, so we couldn't talk about it. But there was an incredible clip. And again, this is Chicago. Fuck Chicago. But shout out to just the people who have to deal with the shit that goes on there day after day. There's a clip of a University of Chicago student just walking along the sidewalk. I'm assuming it's on campus, when a thug with a hoodie runs up off the street, points a gun in her face, tries to rob her, to which the student says, no, fuck you, begins to wrangle the gun away, is able to drop the magazine from the handgun and just huck it out of sight, out of view, leaving them just looking at each other like, well, now what do we do? And oh yeah, I'll have the video too. I'll add it to this episode so those who are watching can see the clip and those who are listening can hear the news interview.
The University of Chicago is warning students about a string of armed robberies that happened on or near campus. One of them was captured on surveillance video just before 3 p.m. Wednesday near 56th and University as a student was walking back to her apartment.
I was just walking home from class and I see a man in a mask approach me.
You could see the suspect snatching Maddie's phone, and that's when she fights back, trying to grab his weapon.
I'm able to get my hands on the gun and remove the magazine out of the gun, and I toss it into the bush.
Maddie is able to run away as her attacker comes back to search for that magazine. He then gets into a dark-colored sedan and takes off with his getaway driver.
I think fight definitely kicked in, but I'm in no way advocating to resist an armed robbery. I think it was really not the right decision, looking back on it. I don't blame the campus, I don't blame the bystander, I don't blame the police. They did a great job. I think it's just finding the people who did this attack, because they will do it again.
Chicago police say a second student was robbed in that same block on Wednesday. Then a third student was robbed off campus just 5 minutes later near 56th and Dorchester.
With this badass student who I want on the show. I would love to find out who she is and where she is and get her on a video call, or maybe, get her here, because it's such a funny clip, especially in the context of just the mess that is Chicago. And the whole time this is happening, while she's walking, as this guy runs up and holds a gun in her face, and as she even is working to wrestle the magazine out of the gun and huck it away, there's just a dude off to the side, sitting on the grass, or a patch of turf, I guess, because it's a city concrete hellscape, watching this just happen, just sitting there, knees in his arms, just watching it like it's something that he's seen every fucking day. And I'd also like to think that this isn't her first rodeo, where she's been walking to class or home and some jackass runs off the road with a Glock and a switch with an extendo in her face, and she goes, all right, well, you're losing that clip again, and just yanks it out of the mag and chucks it. Like, you can tell that she didn't think twice. She just engaged and dropped the mag and threw it. Very impressive, very cool. But quite possibly one of the most Chicago things I've ever seen. And just every time I see it, it just makes me laugh. It's just so fucking good. Let's see here. I'm going to try to wrap it up. Make it a short, quick update. I know last episode was very long. I don't want to close on that just yet. Let's look at this. Oh yeah, this is an Uncle Ted, but right below it I have some pharma BS. I've classified this. There's a record drug shortage that's being blamed on a broken pharmaceutical supply chain caused by fewer U.S. manufacturers making cheaper generic drugs due to scarce profits. And wow, it's almost like we not only killed off those companies, but also vilified anyone taking said cheaper generic drugs during something that took place around 2020. I wonder if we wouldn't be facing this huge drug shortage if we hadn't done that, as we completely upended the global supply chain and economy and fucked it worse than we ever have before. The Eli Lilly drug, the diabetes drug that is now hailed as a weight loss drug. Why would you ever want to go to the gym or eat right when you can just stab yourself with a needle daily? It's got great sleep apnea, I hope. And who would have thought if you lost weight, you might sleep better? Losing weight typically results in a lot of health benefits, but shocker, I guess being able to breathe while you sleep because your rolls aren't choking you out is one of them. So who would have figured? Shout out to the researchers for sticking with it and discovering that excellent benefit of this miracle drug that is not only going to help us out of this obesity crisis, but also the possibility of a recession. And with that being said, and in the context of the global conflicts we are in, and also I listened to an episode of Modern Wisdom. I think it's Modern Wisdom, the British guy, had on some reporter who's considers herself somewhat of a nuclear weapons expert because she's interviewed and has done pieces about a lot of things. She's a big doomsdayer. She likes to think that, maybe she doesn't like to think, but she truly does think that we're just going to go into a nuclear winter as everyone nukes each other, regardless of her beliefs and how high she sounds whenever she opens her mouth. She shared some pretty alarming facts about the number of weapons out there, their capabilities, and how the protocols are for launching said weapons. And then when you consider who is at the tip of those protocols, who makes the call to launch such an irreversible decision into the universe, and with the fact that an election or selection is coming up this year, one might find his or herself spiraling rather quickly down the black-pilled rabbit hole. I know I did after doing some reading and listening to her, and again, being reminded that we have just the least possibly fit individuals to lead and run countries doing that exact job. But that's how government works. Just universally, it's not the most qualified who end up in the job. It is the ones who can weasel their way in and hold on to power with their cold, decrepit hands until they're in the grave. And even after they're in the grave, it turns out, as they can still vote once they're dead. And that's a new one that we recently discovered. But with that in mind, remember to control your controllables, watch your finances, make smart decisions, and live a healthy life. Do whatever you can to make your life better and sort of strive toward and obtain self-excellence, self-sufficiency, and just enjoy life. Talk a lot about purpose here every now and then. And part of your purpose is to enjoy this life and everything in it. It's beautiful. It's fun. Make friends. Do fun things with them responsibly and morally. That's sort of part of that purpose of enjoying life, is to live a moral life while being happy and seeking joy in this world. And, that means caring for others, helping others, taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally. And we all, for the most part, everyone who listens to this probably is tuned into that vein and knows that living that sort of life feels good. It makes you happy. It's like getting out of the gym. After you work out, you feel great. You can just expand that to sort of every other thing. You put in the work, you do the right thing, you have a little fun, and life just makes sense. It's good. It's awesome. And even if there are however many thousands or hundreds or whatever the fuck they are, warheads pointed at us at any given moment. Can we control it? Nope. If you want to prepare for it, absolutely take the steps to do so. But yeah, that's just my take. It's a bit of a stoic take, not letting the uncontrollables or the externals, as they call them, really control you. Don't be a slave to the things outside of your control, is what they mostly say. But take care of yourself. Build that community, maybe. We have 100 or so idiots out here who get after it, who are involved and sort of share the same mindset, if you will. And this weekend it was one of our boys' birthdays. We gathered here, we grilled, we smoked some cigars, we went into the bar, we drank, and we all went home and going to the gym the next morning. But it's that sort of thing, and it was touched on in, I think, an Art and War episode. You got to have non-shooting or non-gun related hobbies. You can't be just let one thing be your identity. And we all have a little bit of autism, sure, so we're always going to circle back or talk about guns or freedom or politics or tyranny or whatever it is. But you got to have fun. It's your purpose in life. You can't only have fun, though. You can't only be drinking and living unhealthy and irresponsible lifestyles. But it's that balance, right? It's a human issue, a human topic, a human problem. It's never going to be black and white. It can't be one thing or another. It's going to be a mix of a lot of things, and that's what makes the struggle of being human and just even the struggles that we experience as humans sort of beautiful in the context of our lives and what we do. So again, a little bit of a shorter episode, but control your controllables this selection season. Do what you can, do what you want. Be prepared if you should so choose, but if you are being prepared, make that training, taking that training seriously, your stockpiling or your acquisition of certain things very serious as well in the context of your finances. Buy once, cry once is a very real thing. The people who have not adopted, the people who have adopted that quote through error know very well how real that is. Me being one of them in a certain number of things as I stepped into this field a little more seriously back in 2019. CQT. If you are hearing this and you are anywhere near Michigan, check them out. The word about them has not gotten out nearly enough, and so I'm going to do the good work of getting them out until I'm told otherwise, I guess. Remember your rights. No thing, whether it be a man, group of men, a document, or several pages, could ever alter your natural rights. Those are given to you by God, by nature, whatever your beliefs may be. Just for being human, you are entitled to those so long as you respect natural rights of others. And try to think about that in the context of whatever you see on the news, however they want to spin the protests. And no doubt, some were a little rough and rowdy, a little more violent, and infringing upon others' natural rights than others. But for the most part, the concept of somebody standing out in a public space, or I get it, not all universities are public, but if they paid to go there, they're probably fine to chill in the quad, and that might be just my interpretation of the law and how I feel about it. But generally speaking, somebody or a group of people speaking out against government actions typically should not be faced with the threat of violence. And should you be cheering for the police or the armed forces in the side of, you versus the college students, even though you're probably watching this from your TV, keep that in mind. Whenever the government does something you don't like and you want to cry out against it, there's probably going to be someone else somewhere cheering for the bayonet, to be pointed at your throat. So it typically never ages well. It never really does well. You have the right to speak out against whatever the fuck the government's doing. And yes, are there absolute morons in those encampments and those demonstrations? Yeah. The ones calling themselves Hamas, they're retarded. There's just no other way around it. You're just a fucking idiot. But they have the right to be a fucking idiot. And certainly, unless they act like Hamas, they can say whatever bullshit that they want. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it. But it's, again, that's one of those gray human things. It's not black or white, obviously. It's going to be messy. But it's interesting, and it's fun, at least for me, to sort of think about that and, talk about that and It's always fun to see where that conversation goes with other people who, probably been conditioned a little more so by the news when it comes to that stuff. But anyways, I digress. I could talk about that all day. Hopefully you guys had an excellent weekend. It's Cinco de Mayo today, actually, so that kind of snuck up on us. I may have to find a patio at some point today and enjoy tacos, margarita maybe, definitely a Dos Equis or a Modelo. Some Mexican beer sounds great. I'm hoping we got some clouds since I stepped out here. We had a nice sunny morning, blue skies. Now we got some darker overcast, but I don't think it's supposed to rain today. So I'm going to try to stay outside today, enjoy some Mexican cuisine and beverage. But until next week, thank you.